We are continuing to investigate the claims on their behalf. We're also looking at the unique aspects of the loss of each family. So we've done a tremendous amount of legal research in terms of the theories that can be brought, the venues, the various actions that can be brought. But primarily we're focusing on the technical aspects and what happened here. We've said from day one that it is important to understand the underlying issue of what happened here. That's why the data is so important, the flight data recorder. That's why that is so crucial. According to the survivor, the lights flickered off and back on just prior to the crash, and then he told the BBC at least that they turned a green color just prior to the crash. Most likely, the plane was switching from the primary electrical bus over to the secondary or emergency lighting. We are continuing to investigate the claims on their behalf. We're also looking at the unique aspects of the loss of each family, because a different member or a different component of each family was lost in this crash. You ask how the families are doing. You know, each day for them is an attempt to adjust to a new life. They are living a new normal, a new reality. The trajectory that their lives would have originally been on has been changed and has altered them in every conceivable way. You know, one of the easier things and the surface thing that is sometimes focused on is the financial aspect. And sometimes you overlook the emotional component, the grief, and what it does to the family's life as a whole. When we worked in the UK all last week, meeting with families, both existing clients and new families who wanted to come talk to us. So, for example, we met with a family who previously lived in the Wembley area, lost the primary breadwinner of their family, and were unable to meet the economic expenses, just the monthly living costs. And so they had to move up to the Leicester area, where it was a little bit more economical for them. In addition to that, the 3 children in their family had to drop out of school, and they are 17, 18, and 20, I think, and had to go back to work to help support the family. So it's impossible to overstate the impact that this has had on every single family. That's just one example. And there's no way to know how their lives would have turned out if they had not been affected by the loss in their family.
And sir, how about the research? I mean, it's been 6 months, so you have done a tremendous research on that. So what are the research and what you have done?
Right. So we've done a tremendous amount of legal research in terms of the theories that can be brought, the venues, the various actions that can be brought. But primarily we're focusing on the technical aspects and what happened here. We've said from day one that it is important to understand the underlying issue of what happened here. That's why the data is so important, the flight data recorder. That's why that is so crucial in this plane. And so what we've done is we've worked with experts to understand what evidence there is based on stories that we already know. For example, we know that according to the survivor, the lights flickered off and back on just prior to the crash, and then he told the BBC at least that they turned a green color just prior to the crash. To us, that indicates most likely the plane was switching from the primary electrical bus over to the secondary or emergency lighting. We've all been on a plane and you've heard in the event of an emergency, lights will illuminate to guide you to the exit. Well, typically that's a greenish light that leads you out. So we think that's what that indicates. To our experts, that says there is an electrical disruption. There's a problem in the electrical system. We don't know for sure either way right now, but that's just what we think. Beyond that, we know that the RAT deployed, the RAT, as the plane is rotating into the air. And that's something that should never happen unless you've had serious issues, either hydraulic, a dual engine failure, or an electrical disruption. Again, that tends to make us think that there's likely an electrical issue on the plane. And so we've also been able to uncover, and I've spoken about this several times, water leaks that occur on these planes because of defective couplings in the areas over the forward and aft electronic equipment bays or rooms underneath the floorboard where computers and electronics are kept. So our question is, if there are leaks on this plane, what effect do those leaks have on the electrical system, and what effect did that have on these symptoms that we are seeing with the crash? And so the experts are still currently working to piece those pieces of information together. Now, we are very interested in news that the AAIB and other investigators may be traveling to Washington, D.C. this week to meet with the National Transportation Safety Board. We are very, very interested in the reasons for their trip, what they may have found, and what it is they think they need to show to the NTSB.
Since you are here in the city, what is the purpose of your visit?
Yeah, so the purpose of the visit here in India, as well as last week in the UK, is primarily to meet with the victims' families, to update them on what we've found so far, to listen to the needs that they have currently, because they all have questions. Questions range from issues with the preliminary compensation program to paperwork that goes back and forth to the 1 crore payment. And one of the more personal issues that comes up from time to time is the return of personal effects and things that may have been gathered at the crash site. And so we are meeting to listen primarily to families and hear their needs, hear what they want to know, and answering those questions as best we can.
So why Air India is asking crash victims and their families to sign forms that protect Boeing, General Electric and other companies from any future claims?
Right. We've heard those stories that there may be a release circulating that Air India or someone else would like for victims to sign that would release everyone. Honestly, I'm not sure of the motivation of why anyone would try to release all of those claims at this point when the investigation is so fresh and ongoing. No one should sign and release an entity when we don't know the facts yet. We don't yet know exactly what caused this, and so no one should sign those documents.
So is it even legal or ethical for an airline to make victims sign a document to remove the responsibility of Boeing and others?
We are exploring those issues currently. The ethical implications to me are probably larger. And again, why any entity would try to force a victim's family to sign something when the information still isn't there. And so we need the investigation to continue so that we can get that information.
Why Air India is trying to shield Boeing and others instead of standing with the passengers who suffer?
Yeah, we encourage Air India to stand firmly with the passengers and stand with them as the investigation continues. We think it's improper at this point to try to shield anyone because we don't know yet what happened.
Why has the 1 crore payment announced by Tata been delayed for so long, and how much the passengers got so far?
Yeah, what we've been told is that very few of the families have received that 1 crore payment so far. We know that Tata has historically been a very honorable company and has concentrated on the needs of its workers as a family. And so at this point, I would like to think those delays are more paperwork issue and maybe some bureaucracy that's in there or maybe some miscommunications. I can tell you that the stories that we hear are that families are sending paperwork in only to be met with more delay. And so at this point, we really don't know why that delay may be there.
So do you think 1 crore is full and final value of life lost in this case?
Of course not. No. There's no way to put a value on a life ever in any circumstance. And so 1 crore or 100 crores or 1,000 is not significant compensation when you look at a life lost. There is simply no way to put a value on a human life.
Can families, especially those who lost their only breadwinner, survive on this amount?
No, again, and that's the story that I related to you a few moments ago. Each family struggles in their own way. The truth is that the families that were affected here cut across every socioeconomic group that we know of, some very wealthy industrialized families to some extremely impoverished families on the ground, outside in the area, not even on the plane. And so, again, no amount of compensation is going to fully take care of these families and certainly not offset the loss of life.
Since you have mentioned MTVS and the trip to Washington, so what do you think Indian investigators are flying to Washington for this review of black box data or something?
Yeah, we're very interested in the reasons behind that, what motivations may be involved, because as you know, if it is something insignificant, if it's something not really related to the underlying cause, then that to me appears to be something that could have been done by Zoom. It could have been done by a phone call or an email or something like that. And so we think it must be significant enough that it requires an in-person visit to D.C. to meet with the investigators. We are very, very interested in that upcoming meeting.
One last question, since we have talked about the personal belongings and everything, gold and silver. So what is the current status of the personal belonging and luggage of the Air India victim? What can families expect these items to be returned?
Yeah. We sort of hear the anecdotal stories, I think, that everyone hears. And what I have been able to piece together from talking with families is that items that we think, for example, you know that at the crash site there will be things that were easily identifiable, things that may have tags or identification, those kinds of things. We would think that those would be returned probably sooner than items that cannot be identified easily. And so what I expect, and again, this is just based on the way I've seen this happen before, is that those items would probably begin to be returned sooner. And then other items that are difficult to identify, there may be some process. I don't know if it's going to be photographs or meetings or how they're going to go about it. But at some point, families will be given the opportunity to view items and hopefully try to identify those.
So you are meeting with government or police officials about this because victims may want their gold and silver and the personal belongings. So are you planning to meet each one of them?
It's not necessarily meetings with the government. I don't think that are going to be an issue here. My understanding, looking at previous crashes, is that the airline will contract with a private company for the collection, cataloging, cleaning of these items, and then so you'll be dealing with those companies and Air India for the return, not necessarily the government.